to episode 6 of Tutor Chat. My name is Helen and I'm joined by Lucy Kennedy, and we both run the 11 Plus English Club together. So in these episodes, we like to share with you hints and tips and all of our advice that we have about sort of preparing your child for the 11 Plus and with their English preparations in particular. So today is a juicy topic. We're talking, I always say this, every lesson, every episode, I'm always like, this is a good one today. We're talking all about ways to improve your child's creative writing. So I know a lot of parents out there, their children will be doing 11 plus exams, and quite a few of them, not all, but quite a few do contain creative writing elements. But I think Lucy and I feel that even if your child's exam doesn't include creative writing, it's still something you should be practicing with them because it's such like a huge integral part of their secondary school English skills as well. So I'm going to pass over to Lucy, who's going to talk a little bit more about the context of creative writing for us and share the first tip with you today.
Hello, thank you very much. So, hey guys, so the first tip, well, before we get on to the tips, actually, I just want to discuss, firstly, why creative writing is such an ambiguous topic and why people have huge meltdowns over it within 11 plus preparation, in my experience, and probably in yours too, Helen. It's usually, you know, the bane of 11 plus study. And quite often within my experience of teaching students for 11 plus, the ones who find creative writing quite difficult are usually the ones that are very mathematically minded. So that means they have strong logical skills. They are very, very good with reasoning and applying any kind of formula or, you know, calculation to something. So what we have to do, because creative writing is the opposite of that, okay, it's being able to be creative, which in itself can be tricky and raise a few eyebrows. It's like, but how do we do that? So when we are kind of left with something that is so ambiguous, we have to try, if we can, to apply some of those logic and reasoning skills to it, so that those who are better with reasoning and things that are black and white and have one answer, so that they're able to understand it better and apply things like a formula to the best piece of creative writing that they're going to write. So that's just a bit of context. That's why they find it quite tricky. So the main thing really, tip number one, is encourage your child to be familiar with seeing if they can spot advanced vocabulary and then being able to maybe use that vocabulary within their writing. So, and we're not talking about just kind of adding it to a list. It's literally like noting the word down, but then thinking quite actively, okay, I'm going to try and use that word in a sentence, or I'm going to try and use that word in my next story. So all of these vocabulary and language skills are basically the core elements of creative writing. And actually, if they practice using those, creative writing in itself will become easier for them.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about those sort of like building blocks, isn't it? Like the foundation. So I think, you know, I think one of the most common questions we get asked is, well, how do I start? What should be my opening? And it's not just an 11 plus thing, like all the way through school. I think even if your child, or you know, goes on to university and things like this, like everyone always says, the hardest thing is writing that first sentence. But once you
Yeah.
get going, 9 times out of 10 it flows after that. So, and so much of that can be kind of overcome and with like we say, sort of structural skills, like thinking about how to use punctuation interestingly, like language devices, all these sorts of things. So kind of following on from this, for point number 2, is in school they talk about like magpieing. So this idea of, you know, magpies, they love shiny objects and they collect them. So this idea of like almost encouraging your child, like we say this all the time, we talked about it we've talked about it in like the vocabulary skills and comprehension, is I'm a big fan of like kids having their own books and just kind of going to town with highlighters and pencils and things and really like actively getting involved in the reading process. Now, don't get me wrong, I know this kind of means that you can't then sell on the books and things like that, but I think the value that comes from actually like kind of physically interacting with the kind of text and the language is really going to help it to be embedded and sort of help your child's memory a lot more with these things. So what they can do, go through, it can be their favorite books, it doesn't have to be anything super formal, it could just be like their favorite books, and get them to, I don't know, highlight an interesting language device. So like Lucy was saying, they need to kind of have a bit of the technical skill, like they need to know what is a simile, what is a metaphor, what is personification, and once they've got that definition and like ability to recognize it, that's when they can start seeing it in other writers and basically sort of making note of it and thinking, this was great, this really appealed to me, what can I now do, how can I take that vocab, how can I take that device and use it in my own writing. I think so many kids get sort of hung up on this idea of like, I've got to be the next J.K. Rowling, you know, I've got to think of this crazy idea that no one's ever thought of before, and we're always saying to them, no, like cherry pick the best bits that you've seen and read and heard and learned all over the place and bring it all together to create something that's like unique to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think within that tip could also be, so for example, I think everyone who looks into kind of creative writing resources may have heard of Descriptosaurus. And Descriptosaurus, there's like a range of these books and they're suitable for, I think it's like ages 7 to 11 or something like that. They have different chapters for different things that you want to describe. Okay, so it could be like a forest scene, or it could be like a seaside town or something like that. And there will be some drawings in there and, you know, illustrations to make it fun and child friendly. But essentially, you've got someone's own ideas, you know, someone else's ideas that are written down as with regards to, you know, words that you could use to describe the sea, words that you could use to describe the sand, and also then some phrases that they've come up with, like descriptive phrases. So essentially, all of these resources are practicing things like magpieing. It's your child being able to look through a list of things and how someone else has done something and appreciate it and say, that's really cool. I love the way that they've described the trees as people, or, you know, I love the way they've used personification. And it's basically encouraging them to appreciate it and then try it out for themselves. It's not the same as copying work. And I think sometimes as teachers and, you know, students, we get a bit worried and we think, oh no, are they copying? Or, you know, you don't want to obviously copy from anyone else, but this is slightly different. Magpieing is literally finding those things that do speak to you, they stand out to you, and you think that's really cool, I want to do the same, and kind of working on from that. So that brings me on quite nicely to our next tip, which is finding inspiration within life. And this can be from daily life, but this can also be, you know, get your child to choose an author, or go to the library with your child and go to, say, for example, the fiction section, and just encourage them to explore and say, you know, is there any particular book that you're interested in? Is there any particular writer that you can see that looks quite good? If so, we'll take those books home, we'll explore them together. And it's, again, finding inspiration. And sometimes, like Helen and I were chatting about this beforehand, kids will say, but what do I need to do? What does that mean to get inspiration? You know, and it's basically something that speaks to you somehow. You've read it, you've heard it, you've watched it, and you think, oh, that's quite cool, or I really like that, I enjoyed reading that, or I think that's really clever, I would love to be able to do the same thing. It's basically getting them to be able to do that themselves, finding that inspiration and then using that for their own writing, so that they then begin building confidence as writers. A lot of the time, as with anything, it's all about confidence. So if they're confident enough and they've read enough as to how other writers do it, then they're more likely to feel confident in themselves.
Definitely, yeah. And I think as well, like with creative writing, especially when it comes to like the 11 plus, like confidence, we've talked about that so much, and like, you know, like ability and ideas and inspiration, it's also important. But I do think one of the main reasons that students sort of lose marks, because we work with so many kids who are like fantastic writers and they have such fantastic ideas, but like, if I'm kind of honest, I think sadly the 11 plus can kind of take away a bit of that sort of that creativity,
Mm,
because it is so time restricted. And
mm,
it's almost like, you know, for us it's a bit of a push and pull. Like we want to kind of nurture and encourage all this creativity, but really, especially when it comes to 11 plus, they also need to be so clear in their understanding of like what the examiner's actually looking for from them. So
yes.
like in our 10 steps to creative writing that we have inside the 11 plus club, 11 plus English club, sorry, we one of the first modules we talk about actually like how to mark your work. So we talk through like the kind of 5 key areas that the kids need to understand. So this is things like ideas, structure, vocabulary, language devices, and punctuation. So we kind of almost try and create this like checklist for the kids, because again,
Mm,
it's that whole thing of like that they sometimes just sit down, produce this huge piece of creative writing, and it's great, but they don't really know what the examiner's looking for. So we kind of break it down to almost like this practical checklist for them. And
mm.
also, like, you know, in terms of like the kind of like, you know, pyramids of learning, they always say that like the best way to learn something or to master it is to teach it. So if your child could actually learn to mark their own creative writing, okay, Lucy and I potentially putting ourselves out of jobs here. but do you know what, like if that's what's going to really help the kids, and we know it will, we know that kind of level of like understanding of what to do,
Absolutely. Yeah.
well, you know, I don't want to say guarantee, I hate that word, but it'll really really help with their chance of getting really high marks, because they're essentially doing a checklist for the examiners showing yes this skill, yes this skill, this skill. And
Yeah.
that is the way the 11 plus sort of creative writing is marked, really.
And again, that really appeals to those students who are mathematically minded, you know, or logic to them is like paramount within their mind. So as soon as they see a checklist, it's like, oh, I can do this now. You
Yeah.
know, I can compare this checklist to my work and I can decide if I've done that or not and where I've lost the marks. It's almost like a revelation to some students when they do that. It's like, but I only used full stops and commas. I really didn't use any more punctuation. You say, I know. So, but straight away, it's like this little nugget of information that you can take and you can use, and instant, you know, improvement for next time round.
Yeah.
They know where they stand with it.
Yeah, I think as well, just quickly to add to it, it's also for yourselves as parents. Like, I think if your child can do a piece of creative, let's say the context of you're working with a tutor, like with us or any tutor that you might be working with, if your child can do a piece of creative writing, and you know, there's always that thing, check your work at the end, and oh, you know,
Mm.
kids do not like checking their work. But you know, if we can get them to check their work, identify those mistakes, correct them, then when you go to work with a tutor, the feedback the tutor is going to be giving is really going to be giving you value for money, because the idea is that hopefully your child will have done all the things that they already know. Because honestly, I think as a tutor, like I spent so much time giving feedback to kids, saying to them, I know you know this. I know you know that a comma should have been there and that you shouldn't use simple words like this. Like all you end up doing is sort of like almost echoing, parroting back things you've already been saying loads. So if
Mm.
we can encourage the kids to actually move past that, you know, to kind of that accountability, they correct it themselves, then as teachers and tutors we can really give high valuable like value for money feedback for you guys to push them beyond kind of where they are at the moment. So yeah,
Yeah, as
big
opposed to literally just going through mistakes and repeating the same advice that we have done each week.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's true. It's true. So that then, with that in mind, all of these, you know, techniques and structure and things like that, that brings us on to our final point. And this is something that we use with our students when it comes to actually being given an exam style question and knowing how to react to it, basically, and what to do, how to not panic. Because when we have structure in place, we have some kind of, you know, mnemonic, which will help us remember what we have to do, or, you know, it could be some kind of acronym or whatever. It really just eases that pressure. So one that we use, one that I use and have used as well, it's Pacman. I use Pacman as like an illustration, but the 3 letters that basically we're focusing on are PAC, PAC. So P stands for purpose, A stands for audience, and C stands for context. So let's say we get a question that asks you to describe your favorite character to a close relative. Okay, describe your favorite character to a close relative. So first off, let's think about the purpose. So your child should be thinking, right, what's my job in this question? Am I writing to explain something? Am I writing to inform someone about something? Am I writing to instruct, describe, recount? There's all these different variations of why we write. And first off, they should be thinking, okay, the purpose is to describe. Okay. Audience, some questions won't detail whether there's, any particular audience in there. But if there is, it's crucial that your child can think, right, what's the difference in writing to a close relative compared to, a head teacher or the Queen. Okay, it's going to be very different in style of language in terms of formality. So if we're describing a character to a close relative, then we can be slightly informal. There could be some cues in there that we could, almost like hint at that we know this person. So slightly informal language, things like that. And again, this tells the examiner just in a few words that you have thought this process through before even, writing anything. And the final letter is C, context. So this is basically what the question's actually asking you to do in terms of details. And it's to describe a character, favorite character. So keyword favorite. So we don't want, a character that your child is repulsed by or finds scary or hates. It's favorite. So it needs to be a character they absolutely adore, they love, they can describe in detail, because if it is your favorite character, then realistically, you're going to know everything about it. So all of these different things have just been funneled down into those 3 steps: purpose, audience, context. And having that structure in place is honestly like monumental for a child who first sees a question like that and goes, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I don't know what I should be doing. It just helps maintain their, mindset and just to feel calm in approaching the question.
Definitely. And I think like the next step that follows that we definitely teach a lot is also like this how to plan really simply, effectively in writing. I think the thing with creative writing is it's the intimidation of a blank page, like a simple instruction. There's nowhere to hide really from a creative writing task.
No.
You have to dive in. It's not like comprehension or maths where we'll say to them, if it's a tricky question, skip it, move on to the next. It's quite an overwhelming thing, I think, sometimes compared to the rest of the paper. So like
absolutely
about today, like if you can just break it down into these very practical, logical, easy ways of looking at it, like this sort of marking checklist, this tick box of language devices, like Lucy's talking about, using like the Pacman sort of structure to identify like the style of writing and things. It's just going to make the process so much easier for the kids and sort of how they do these things.
Yeah, because ultimately I think when you have a question, say for example like the one that I just gave, your child will have learned so many different techniques, features of language, styles, formalities, structures, and it's all within their mind. So when they do see a question and they're under time pressure and it's an exam that's, selective, having those, say for example, Pacman or our 6-point plan, that is keeping them composed and calm and just encouraging them to select, to cherry pick from all of that knowledge, which features of their knowledge are going to be the most beneficial in this scenario, is going to gain them the most marks. So yeah, I would say it's absolutely vital, because a lot of the time when they're doing comprehension, it it could be multiple choice. If it's verbal reasoning, it's multiple choice. They're not so exposed. They know that it hasn't got to come out of their mind. It's literally just a case of ticking a box. So I think that's why it can be quite scary for them. But yeah, as I say, tips that we've shared today should really help.
Yeah, most definitely. Okay, guys, right. So thank you so much for listening. We hope it's been helpful. As always, we could talk about this for hours, and we will definitely be back with more Tutor Chat episodes, all to do with tips of creative writing to help and support your child. But if you do have any sort of burning questions about it in the meantime, please get in touch with us. You can find us on our website, 11 Plus English Club, all one word.co.uk. Or you can contact us on social media, comment on videos, etc. Like most people, we're pretty accessible all over the internet. So we hope you found this helpful. And also as well, if you haven't already downloaded our sample course, please do. There is a link to it in the notes, in the show notes here, or the video notes, sorry. And yes, on there you'll be able to find a lot of what we're talking about here with creative writing, with practice resources, examples and everything. So it'd be super helpful if you haven't signed up and tried that already. Otherwise, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you very soon for episode 7, our next one. All right, guys, take care.
Take care. Bye.